Today, we look at 5 Karens who got eaten alive by animals. From a tourist who berated her guide moments before stepping into lion territory, to a hiker who mocked safety warnings all the way into mountain goat country. But first, we begin in South Africa, where a woman's demand for the perfect photograph puts her face to face with a predator that doesn't negotiate. It was September 14th, 2015, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across a private game reserve in South Africa's Limpopo province. The dry winter air carried the scent of dust and acacia as a safari vehicle idled on a dirt track, its passengers watching a pride of lions resting beneath a cluster of umbrella thorns some distance ahead. Karen Morrison was a 42-year-old insurance claim supervisor from San Diego, California, whose co-workers had long described her as someone who treated every interaction as a negotiation she intended to win. She had spent 23 years in the same office, gradually ascending to a position where she could delegate unpleasant tasks and challenge decisions made above her pay grade. Former colleagues said she had a habit of escalating minor disagreements into formal complaints and had once threatened legal action against a coffee shop over a loyalty card dispute. Her vacation to South Africa was meant to celebrate her recent divorce settlement, a trip she had planned meticulously while demanding upgrades and substitutions at every opportunity. Fellow guests at the lodge had already witnessed 2 confrontations before the safari departed that afternoon. During the morning safety briefing, the head guide, a seasoned ranger named Willem, emphasized that guests must remain inside the vehicle at all times. He explained that lions viewed humans outside vehicles as prey or territorial threats, rather than the non-threatening observers they appeared to be when seated. Karen interrupted twice, once to complain about departure time, and again to question why they couldn't get closer than what Willem described as safe distances. The vehicle had stopped at an appropriate distance from the pride, and guests were quietly photographing when Karen began expressing displeasure. She complained loudly that the animals were too far for decent photographs, and that she hadn't paid premium rates to squint at shapes in the distance. Willem reminded her calmly that approaching closer would endanger the group. Karen called him overcautious and suggested he was padding tour time to avoid actual work. Other guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. As guests photographed, a lioness separated from the pride and moved into tall grass to the vehicle's right. Willem noticed and quietly instructed everyone to remain absolutely still. The lioness was hunting something, possibly a warthog in the brush, and her path would bring her within a few dozen yards of the vehicle. Karen seized the moment to stand, raising her camera above the metal frame to get an unobstructed shot. Willem ordered her to sit immediately. She waved him off without looking back. African lions are apex predators, with females weighing between 265 and 395 pounds, and males exceeding 420 pounds. Lionesses are the primary hunters of a pride, capable of short bursts of speed that can close distance in seconds and coordinated takedowns of prey several times their size. Their killing method typically involves suffocation, clamping powerful jaws around the throat or muzzle to collapse the windpipe or cut off blood flow to the brain. Lions view humans outside vehicles as potential prey, their predatory instincts triggered by movement and vulnerability. The lioness's head snapped toward the movement. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then she began moving toward the vehicle, her body low, shoulder blades rolling beneath tawny fur. As Karen continued to stand, the lioness veered sharply, adjusting her approach toward the disturbance. Willem started the engine, but Karen remained standing, apparently believing she was getting exceptional footage. When the lioness broke into a sprint, covering the distance with terrifying speed, Willem shouted for everyone to hold on and attempted to reverse. Karen lost her balance as the vehicle lurched. She tumbled over the side rail, landing hard on packed dirt just a few feet from the vehicle. The lioness struck immediately, her jaws clamped over Karen's neck and lower face, compressing her airway and major neck vessels. Her full weight pinned Karen to the ground. Karen's hands came up reflexively, pushing at the lioness's muzzle, but her strength faded within seconds as her airway collapsed. Her legs kicked briefly, then went still. The lioness maintained her grip, holding her for well over a minute as her body twitched and then went completely limp. Karen's hands came up reflexively, pushing at the lioness's muzzle, but her strength faded within seconds as her airway collapsed. Her legs kicked briefly, then went still. The lioness briefly applied additional pressure, ensuring the kill was complete. Only when Willem revved the engine and drove the vehicle directly toward her, shouting and honking aggressively, did the lioness release her grip. The disturbance caused her to retreat into the tall grass, abandoning the body. Emergency responders reached the site within minutes. Karen was found with catastrophic injuries to her neck and upper body. Officials determined the cause of death to be suffocation and massive blood loss caused by the lion's bite. The reserve concluded that safety protocols had been followed by staff, and that Karen's decision to stand and ignore direct instructions had precipitated the encounter. The lioness was not destroyed, as her behavior was deemed a natural predatory response. Fellow guests who witnessed the attack were offered counseling, and several cut their trips short. While Karen Morrison's demands for a closer photograph ended in a lioness's jaws in South Africa, a woman in Australia's Northern Territory would soon discover that crocodile-infested waters show no deference to self-appointed experts. It was March 22, 2016, and the humid air hung heavy over the Adelaide River floodplain, about an hour outside Darwin in Australia's Northern Territory. The water moved slowly, brown and opaque, lined with paperbarks and pandanus palms that concealed the banks from easy view. Linda Hayes was a 38-year-old middle school vice principal from Melbourne who had built her professional reputation on enforcing rules for others while finding exceptions for herself. Colleagues described her as someone who demanded strict compliance from students and staff, but regularly bypassed protocols she found personally inconvenient. She had been written up twice by her superintendent for overstepping administrative boundaries, both times responding with grievances that dragged on for months. Her ex-husband later described her as someone who believed consequences applied to everyone but her. She had a history of arguing with flight attendants about seatbelt regulations and had once been removed from a guided tour in New Zealand for ignoring safety warnings about a glacier hike. Her vacation to the top end was meant to be a wildlife photography expedition, a hobby she approached with aggressive certainty. She had booked a river cruise advertised as a crocodile viewing experience, joining a group of 11 other tourists on an aluminum vessel designed for safe observation. The tour operator, a weathered local with over 20 years of experience on the river, delivered the mandatory safety briefing before departure. He explained that the Adelaide River system contained one of the highest concentrations of saltwater crocodiles in the world. He emphasized that passengers must remain seated and must never place hands or any body part near the water. Under no circumstances were passengers to approach the rails or lean over the edge. Linda responded with visible skepticism, questioning whether the warnings were legally required or simply theatrical. When the guide explained that multiple fatalities had occurred in territory waters, she dismissed the information as exaggerated local folklore designed to make the tour seem more exciting. Other passengers later recalled her rolling her eyes and muttering about overprotective guides who underestimated people's intelligence. She had researched crocodile attacks before the trip and believed she understood the risks better than a local boat operator. 20 minutes into the cruise, the boat stopped near a muddy bank where a large saltwater crocodile basked in the afternoon sun. The reptile measured approximately 14 feet and weighed an estimated 1,000 pounds. Its massive body stretched across the mud with jaws slightly agape. Passengers photographed from their seats while the guide provided information about crocodile biology, explaining that saltwater crocodiles were the largest living reptiles and could go months without eating. Linda complained to those near her that the angle was poor and the distance too great for quality photographs. She stood and moved to the stern, leaning over the low rail to get a shot without other passengers in her frame. The guide ordered her to sit down immediately. She ignored him completely, bracing one hand on the rail and extending her camera toward the water's surface. The crocodile on the bank had slipped into the water moments after the boat stopped, its movement so subtle that only the guide noticed. This behavior was typical. Crocodiles often entered the water when boats approached, positioning themselves for ambush beneath the surface, where their dark bodies blended with the muddy bottom. The guide began maneuvering the vessel away from the bank, but Linda remained at the stern, apparently unaware that the crocodile had disappeared. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptiles, with males commonly exceeding 16 feet and occasionally reaching over 20 feet in length. Large males can weigh well over 1,000 pounds. They are ambush predators of extraordinary patience, capable of remaining motionless for hours while monitoring prey movement. Their bite is among the most powerful in the animal kingdom, strong enough to crush bone instantly, and their hunting strategy typically involves explosive acceleration from the water, clamping onto prey and dragging it beneath the surface. The guide shouted a final warning, his voice carrying across the water. The crocodile struck from directly beneath the stern. The water erupted as the animal launched vertically, its jaws closing around Linda's right forearm and wrist with crushing force. The impact caused a severe fracture, bones splintering under pressure as the animal's weight pulled her toward the water. The interlocking teeth penetrated deep into muscle and tendon. Linda's scream was cut short as the crocodile's weight pulled her over the rail and into the water headfirst. She disappeared beneath the surface almost immediately, the turbid water closing over her within seconds. Other passengers later described seeing her camera fly into the air and land separately in the water several feet away. The water churned violently as the crocodile initiated its death roll, spinning through the murky water amid clouds of blood and sediment. The rolling continued for several seconds, the crocodile's jaws maintaining their crushing grip on her arm as the violent rotation disoriented her and prevented any attempt to surface. The death roll caused catastrophic damage to her shoulder and upper arm, tearing muscle and ligament while driving her deeper underwater. Her shoulder dislocated and then suffered complete structural failure as the rotational force exceeded the joint's natural limits. Her body surfaced briefly, face down and motionless, before being dragged under again as the crocodile repositioned its grip and pulled her toward deeper water. Witnesses reported seeing her limp form roll once more at the surface before vanishing entirely. The entire attack, from the initial strike to the final disappearance, lasted approximately 45 seconds. A search operation continued for 3 days, involving boat patrols, helicopter overflights, and crocodile trappers experienced in locating submerged remains. They set baited hooks and monitored known crocodile feeding areas. Linda's remains were located 4 days after the attack, cached beneath a submerged log system approximately 1 mile downstream from the attack site. The condition confirmed that the crocodile had fed extensively, with approximately a significant portion of tissue removed, consistent with the size of a 14 to 16-foot male over several days. The official cause of death was drowning, with massive blood loss from the injuries listed as a contributing factor. Following the attack, Northern Territory authorities launched an investigation into the tour operator's safety protocols. The operator was cleared of any liability, with investigators noting that Linda had received multiple direct warnings and had deliberately violated explicit safety instructions. The crocodile was not hunted or destroyed, as authorities determined it was acting on natural predatory instincts in its native habitat. The tour company implemented new policies requiring guides to physically block passengers who attempted to stand near rails, and all vessels were retrofitted with additional barriers. Linda's family filed a wrongful death claim against the tour operator, but it was dismissed based on the signed liability waiver and clear evidence of her deliberate noncompliance. As the Adelaide River claimed another victim, who believed warnings were meant for others, a woman in Kenya would step into the shallows of Lake Victoria, convinced that hippos were slow, docile creatures, best photographed at close range. It was July 10th, 2017, and the morning mist still clung to the shoreline of Lake Victoria, near Kisumu, Kenya, where the water met tall papyrus reeds in a maze of channels and mudflats. The lake stretched to the horizon, deceptively calm, its surface broken occasionally by the rounded backs of hippopotamuses, moving between deeper water and the shallows. Sharon Whitfield was a 45-year-old real estate agent from Phoenix, Arizona, who had spent 3 decades perfecting the art of getting what she wanted through sheer persistence and volume. Her adult children had declined to join her on this trip, citing previous travel experiences that had devolved into public arguments with hotel staff and tour guides. One of her daughters later told investigators that Sharon had a pattern of ignoring rules she considered inconvenient, believing her experience and judgment outweighed any posted warning. Sharon had described the trip to friends as a bucket list adventure, though she had done minimal research and arrived with expectations shaped primarily by documentary footage and resort brochures. The lakeside camp where she was staying had clear protocols regarding wildlife interaction. A printed notice in each tent warned guests that hippos regularly moved through the camp at night, and that guests should never approach the water's edge alone. The camp manager, a Kenyan woman named Grace, personally briefed Sharon on the first evening, explaining that hippos are responsible for more human fatalities across Africa than nearly any other large animal and are notoriously territorial. Sharon listened with visible impatience, interrupting twice to ask when breakfast would be served. On her second morning, Sharon woke before dawn and decided to photograph the sunrise over the lake. She ignored the protocol requiring guests to request an escort and walked alone toward the shoreline. When a groundskeeper spotted her and called out a warning, she waved dismissively and continued walking. Sharon had waited approximately 15 feet from shore when the water in front of her suddenly bulged upward, Hippopotamuses are among Africa's most dangerous animals, responsible for an estimated 500 human deaths annually. Despite their rotund appearance, they are remarkably fast and agile, capable of running at speeds approaching 20 miles per hour on land and moving through water with powerful efficiency. Adult males can weigh over 4,000 pounds, and their jaws can open to nearly 180 degrees, revealing canine teeth that can exceed 12 inches in length. A massive bull hippo surfaced with explosive force, water cascading off its barrel-shaped body as it surged toward her. Its mouth opened wide, the pink interior and long ivory tusks clearly visible. Sharon stumbled backward but lost her footing in the soft mud, falling into the shallows. The hippo lunged and clamped its jaws around her torso in a sudden crushing bite. The force knocked the air from her lungs instantly. The animal released almost immediately. Witnesses later reported the hippo jerking its head upward, lifting Sharon partially from the water before dropping her. In its retreat, the animal surged forward and stepped over her, its massive weight driving her deeper into the mud. By the time the hippo finally retreated into deeper water, Sharon had sustained extensive puncture wounds, blunt force trauma to the chest, and massive internal hemorrhage. While Sharon Whitfield's sunrise photography session ended in the jaws of a territorial hippo, a woman in Montana would soon dismiss every warning about grizzly bears as overblown government fear-mongering. It was June 5, 2018, and the morning sun filtered through lodgepole pines along a backcountry trail in Montana's Glacier National Park, where the air smelled of pine needles and distant snowmelt. The trail wound through prime grizzly habitat, dense timber interspersed with berry-rich clearings, and the Park Service had posted fresh warnings at every trailhead following multiple bear sightings in the preceding week. Patricia Clark was a 50-year-old dental office manager from suburban Denver who had planned this hiking trip as a personal challenge, a way to prove to herself and others that she could handle wilderness conditions without what she called the excessive hand-holding promoted by government agencies. She had posted extensively on social media in the weeks before the trip, mocking national park regulations and insisting that bear danger was statistically negligible. She had purchased bear spray at a sporting goods store, but had never practiced using it. At the trailhead that morning, Patricia encountered a park ranger conducting routine hiker contacts. The ranger informed her that a sow grizzly with 2 cubs had been sighted repeatedly along the trail she intended to hike and recommended she choose an alternate route or wait to join a larger group. Patricia responded with hostility, accusing the ranger of trying to control where people could walk on public land. She set off alone, declining the offered bear safety pamphlet. The trail climbed steadily through timber before opening into a meadow thick with huckleberry bushes. Patricia stopped multiple times to photograph wildflowers and distant peaks, apparently unconcerned about making noise or remaining alert. 2 separate hiking parties passed her going the opposite direction, both warning her about a fresh bear sign ahead. She thanked neither group and continued forward. Approximately 3 miles from the trailhead, the trail narrowed and curved around a dense thicket of willows bordering a small creek. Patricia was moving quickly, eyes on her phone as she checked the GPS, when she rounded the curve and found herself less than 40 feet from a female grizzly and 2 yearling cubs. The sow was standing on her hind legs testing the air, and the cubs were behind her in the brush. Patricia froze. Grizzly bears in the northern Rockies typically weigh between 400 and 800 pounds, with females averaging toward the lower end of that range. Despite their bulk, they can sprint at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour and cover short distances faster than any human can react. Grizzlies are not typically predatory toward humans, but sows with cubs are extraordinarily defensive and account for the majority of fatal maulings in North America. The sow dropped to all fours and charged without a bluff display. Patricia turned to run, the worst possible response, and managed perhaps 3 strides before the bear overtook her. The impact struck her from behind, the bear's weight driving her face first into the rocky trail. Patricia's nose and several teeth were shattered on contact with the ground. Before she could rise, the sow was on top of her. The bear's front paw came down on Patricia's upper back with crushing force, claws raking deep furrows from her shoulder blade to her spine. Patricia screamed as the sow bit down on her left shoulder and upper arm, shaking violently before releasing. The bear struck again with her paw, this time catching Patricia across the side of her head and face. The blow fractured her cheekbone and jaw. The claws opened her scalp in several places, blood pouring down her face and neck. The sow repositioned and bit into Patricia's upper back, jaws clamping down on muscle and bone with enough force to crack ribs. She shook her massive head, tearing tissue and opening wounds that immediately began bleeding heavily. The bear's weight pressed down on Patricia's torso, compressing her chest and making it nearly impossible to breathe. Patricia's attempts to protect herself grew weaker as shock and blood loss took hold. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds but inflicted catastrophic damage. The sow delivered multiple crushing bites to Patricia's back and shoulders, while her claws tore through clothing and flesh across Patricia's ribcage, arms, and the back of her head. When Patricia's body went limp and her screaming stopped, the sow stepped back, huffing loudly. She stood over Patricia briefly, then moved away toward her cubs and disappeared into the timber. A hiking party found her later that morning. They initially attempted to check for signs of life, but retreated when they noticed fresh bear scat nearby. Rangers reached the area using a helicopter. Patricia was pronounced dead at the scene. Officials documented massive soft tissue destruction to the back, shoulders, and scalp, multiple rib fractures, severe facial trauma, and fatal blood loss consistent with a defensive grizzly bear mauling. The sow and cubs were not destroyed, as the attack was deemed a natural defensive response to sudden close contact. As Patricia Clark's dismissal of ranger warnings ended beneath a grizzly's weight in Montana, a woman in the Bahamas would soon learn that sharks do not distinguish between confidence and carelessness. It was October 17, 2014, and the turquoise water off the western shore of New Providence Island shimmered under a cloudless Caribbean sky. The dive boat had anchored a few miles offshore, where the sandy bottom dropped away into deeper blue, and the water column teemed with reef fish, sea turtles, and the sleek gray shapes that had made this site famous. Cynthia Reynolds was a 39-year-old pharmaceutical sales representative from Atlanta who had built her career on aggressive persistence and her personal life on the assumption that her judgment was superior to most. She had arrived in the Bahamas for a week of diving, specifically seeking out operators who offered shark encounters. Her dive certification was basic, an open water card earned 5 years earlier, but she had informed the boat crew that she was essentially an expert, having completed over 20 dives in various locations. The crew noted that she had questioned their equipment choices, criticized the boat's departure time, and loudly complained about the presence of novice divers in her group. The dive operator specialized in controlled shark feeding experiences, a controversial but legal practice in Bahamian waters. The dive master, a Bahamian woman named Keisha, explained that bull sharks would be attracted to the site using bait contained in a secured metal crate. Divers would remain in a designated observation area, marked by weighted ropes a short distance from the feeding zone. Under no circumstances were divers to approach the bait crate, touch the sharks, or leave the observation area. Keisha emphasized that bull sharks are highly competitive during feeding and capable of sudden, forceful bites, and that divers must never leave the observation area or touch the bait. Cynthia interrupted several times during the briefing, asking why divers couldn't get closer for better photographs and suggesting that the safety perimeter was excessive. The dive proceeded normally at first. A cluster of bull sharks, ranging from 7 to 11 feet in length and weighing between 200 and 500 pounds, circled the bait crate as divers watched from the observation line. Cynthia had positioned herself at the edge of the group, her camera housing extended toward the sharks, frequently drifting forward until Keisha signaled her back. As the feeding reached its peak, with sharks darting through clouds of dispersed bait and fish fragments, Cynthia pushed off the bottom and swam directly toward the crate, leaving the observation area entirely. Bull sharks are among the most aggressive shark species, highly competitive in feeding situations and capable of biting with extraordinary force. During feeding events, they enter a state of heightened arousal, reacting reflexively to blood, vibrations, and erratic movements. Their serrated teeth are designed to cut through flesh and bone efficiently. Cynthia had reached the bait crate and was attempting to photograph a shark feeding directly from the metal mesh when a large female bull shark turned sharply and collided with her extended arm. The shark's jaws closed around Cynthia's right forearm just below the elbow. The serrated teeth cut deeply into tissue before the shark released almost immediately. A powerful, reflexive bite, typical during feeding events. Cynthia recoiled violently, tearing her arm free and creating severe lacerations that began bleeding heavily into the water. The sudden burst of movement and blood altered the behavior of the nearby sharks. Several turned in her direction, circling tightly. One brushed against her injured arm, its rough skin scraping the wound as it passed. As Cynthia attempted to regain control of her buoyancy, her regulator slipped partially from her mouth. She inhaled seawater and began to panic, kicking erratically. A smaller bull shark made a quick, forceful pass and delivered a single bite to her right thigh before veering away. It did not hold on. After that second strike, the sharks resumed circling behavior rather than continuing repeated attacks. Keisha and another dive master were already moving toward her, using metal poles and hard camera housings to redirect approaching sharks and create space. They reached Cynthia within seconds, forming a defensive barrier and pulling her away from the feeding zone. The sharks followed briefly, but did not continue striking once she was removed from the active bait area. By the time they pulled Cynthia clear of the immediate danger, she had sustained severe bite wounds to her right forearm and right thigh. The crew initiated emergency ascent procedures and administered oxygen once on the surface while applying direct pressure to her wounds. A marine emergency helicopter was dispatched from Nassau and arrived within 30 minutes. Cynthia was barely conscious and had inhaled significant seawater during the chaos. Her right thigh injury had caused extensive blood loss, and despite aggressive efforts to control the bleeding, her condition deteriorated rapidly. Cynthia was airlifted to a hospital but died during transport. Officials later determined the cause of death to be hemorrhagic shock due to severe vascular injury to the right thigh, with drowning listed as a contributing factor. The dive operator's license was temporarily suspended pending investigation, though final findings concluded that Cynthia had deliberately violated safety protocols by leaving the observation area and approaching the active feeding zone. No action was taken against the business beyond a requirement for enhanced briefing documentation. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now